Hello, everyone, and welcome to our what is this? Our final March webinar in our webinar series. Just a quick reminder, if you're ever wondering what we're doing for webinars, we do 3 or 4 or 5 webinars for our clients every month. You can always visit affinityconsulting.com/webinars and see the latest and greatest of what's going on in Affinity webinar world. But I'm really glad that you're here with me today. We're going to be talking about moving from reactive to proactive, the 3 keys to lasting law firm success. We've all learned a lot over the last year. And as we were talking about a topic for this webinar, we were talking about ways that we could summarize what we've really all learned. And I want to start off by talking for just a minute and talking about how things were starting to change. I'm calling BC, before COVID. Things were starting to change. A lot more of our clients were talking to us about value billing or fixed rate billing and how do they get away from the billable hour. Not necessarily for financial reasons, but for just like mental health reasons. Billing hourly for your time is one of the hardest things that we talk to our clients about having to do. We've also been facing this commoditization of services with legal service providers, and that is something that we're going to be seeing more and more of as states start to adopt rule changes that allow non-lawyers to run law firms. There's already some of that going on in Utah and Arizona, and if you're not up to speed on that, I'd encourage you to check that out. There's also been a real movement to prioritize looking at how people are getting their work done. This didn't have anything to do with COVID. It was really, are we working as efficiently as we can? Do we have the right technology? Do we have the right tools? Have we gotten caught in this rhythm of how we've always done things? And then finally, there's been increasing resistance towards the traditional work environment. And that has been really hard for some of our clients, especially partners who are traditionalists or even baby boomers who really believe that if the person isn't sitting in the office next to me, how will I know that they're getting any work done? We depend on our support staff in a way that we couldn't ever imagine, having our support staff working remotely. But there was a lot of chatter and work-life balance and people wanting to make sure they didn't miss things with their kids, where the traditional work environment was being challenged. Not always successfully, but it was being challenged. And then we were all faced with this situation called COVID, where there were mixed reactions, right? That started happening and we were all like, well, yeah, I guess we can't travel anymore. We need to send people home. We need to be safe. We need to protect our people. And those reactions happened just different levels for different people. Some people were really freaked out about it. Some people were really annoyed by it, like, oh my goodness, is this really that big of a deal? Do we really need to disrupt everything? But there were a lot of our clients who were really worried about what was going to happen from a cash flow perspective, what was going to happen from a business perspective, what was going to happen from a client perspective. How were we going to be able to get the work done that we had been getting done? And then we went into this phase that I'm calling waiting. Like we were waiting, like it's not going to take very long. So let's take the path of least resistance to get people successfully working from home. Let's invest in the technology at sometimes, for lots of our clients, the bare minimum to do what we need to do to get people from working from home. I remember talking to a client early on, they were talking about home work environments, about how they gave people laptops. In some cases, they gave people Chromebooks and they were small little screens. So we're sending people home who are used to having 2 monitors on their desk with a small screen, but we were just waiting because we thought it was going to happen quickly. We thought we were going to go home for 2 weeks or go home for a month and then come back. Now, I'm just kind of replaying this because I think that there is an important lesson to be learned, even though this was painful and it was hard and we did lots of things in a short period of time. The reality is, for most of our clients, if I would have said in March, hey, 1 year from now, all your people are going to be working from home, or 6 months from now, all your people are going to be working from home, they wouldn't have even believed it. Maybe in February, they wouldn't have even believed that they could have made it happen. But that overnight shift to remote work, being flexible just to prevent not being able to do the next thing, and then increasing the focus on the value that we were giving to the client. Like, how did we make sure that we were still giving our clients the same kind of value for the money that they were spending with us? I've kind of banned the word normal, right? Because we're not going back to that. And even though I talk to a lot of clients every week, even though there are still a handful that are saying, every person's coming back to the office, we want to be working the same way that we were working pre-COVID, it's not going to happen that way. I mean, we're all changed because of that. The way that we get our work done has changed because of that. And what I want to encourage you to think about today is how to take some of the changes that happened and how to think about this differently, and think about 3 things that you can leverage to really experience success in 2021. Everyone hates the new normal phrase, so I'm just going with what's next. So we have to replace those stopgap measures. We have to really think about some of the things that we did to get from where we were to where we needed to be during that time, and think about ways that we can not just focus on technology, but think about what is this firm going to look like? What is it going to look like when we are on the other side of this? What will our work environment look like? How will our people get their work done? Where will it be okay for us to go back to the way we did it before? And this is now a good time, especially for those of you who are not yet back in the office, to think about what things you don't want to go back to the way that it was done before. That's, I think, a really, really important takeaway here is, how do you start to think about the things that were really inefficient or were kind of old school and you really weren't sure you were going to how you were going to get out of them? Like, for example, we are less dependent on paper today. It would be very hard for people to argue, especially if you spent any amount of time working from home, that your dependency on paper decreased at least a little bit. That is a place where we could really leverage technology and say, how do we even take that to the next level? How do we make sure that we are relying on electronic files more and more in the future and not less and less? It's also a great opportunity for us to think about building our firm for survival, not just profitability, but profitability and survival. I really do believe that the legal industry is in for some big changes in the next 3 to 5 years. And if we take the way that a firm worked, let's say in December of 2019, and we try to recreate that in April or May of 2021, we're going to set ourselves pretty far back. Moving the ball forward, thinking about what your competition is going to look like, thinking about what kind of demand for legal services is going to come in the balance of 2021, and positioning your firm in a way that you can be prepared to compete in the future. Things are getting more and more competitive as every day goes on. And then I want to encourage you too, before we jump into the meat of these 3 things, to take a more holistic approach. It's time for us to take a couple steps back and look at everything from, I call it from the front door to the back door. How do we get our work? How does it come in the door? How do we open our files? How do we think about where files go from a people assignment perspective? How do we make sure that we're leveraging and we're doing the right amount of mentoring and training? How do we make sure that we've put the right efficiencies into place? How do we make sure that our bills go out the way that they should go out? How do we close our files? And then how do we deal with our people? How do we deal with our processes? These are all things, opportunities for us in 2021 to really think about doing things differently. So let's jump into the 3 keys for maximizing profitability in 2021. The first one that I want to start with is an employee-centered approach. Now, you might say, well, we've always taken an employee-centered approach. I think that there is a way for us to think about doing that differently. And it starts with talking about how you attract and retain top talent, right? So attracting talent is one thing. Getting people to come and work at your firm is one thing. Keeping them there is another. we have worked with a lot of our clients to help them understand the cost of turnover. And it's incredibly high. A lot of it depends on the position and how much of your processes are documented and how much training and mentoring goes into bringing on a new person. But no matter how you slice it, it is expensive to deal with turnover. And so when we think about attracting the right people and having the right people at our firm, we should partner that thought up with how do we get them and how do we keep them? And retaining top talent goes a long way towards minimizing your turnover. And when you retain that top talent, it's a whole lot easier to attract people. I've been in a lot of interviews with clients where they say, we have legal assistants or paralegals who have worked here for 25 years. That has been worn like a badge of honor. But when you marry that, we have people who have worked here for a long time and we get our work done really efficiently, that's where the real magic happens. So we're going to talk in a few minutes a little bit about technology, because part of attracting and retaining top talent is making sure that people have the best tools that they need to get their jobs done. The second part is great place to work. And that, there's a lot of different facets to great place to work. Some of it is financial and benefits. How do we pay our people and what kind of benefits do they have? But there's some of it that is less tangible than the financial piece of it. And that is freedom and flexibility to do what they need to do. It's how do we manage and control PTO? It's what kind of, do we ever just say, let's cut out at 4 o'clock on a Friday before a holiday weekend? It's what the environment is like. Is it collegial? Do people find themselves making friends at work? There's a lot that goes into making a great place to work. And I would encourage you, earlier today, I Googled things I can do to make my company a great place to work. And of course, there's millions of articles that come up. And I read through the first 3 or 4, and there were some excellent ideas there. One of the things I love about where we are in 2021 is that information is pretty much free. You can get it pretty easily if you just are pretty good at a couple of Google search terms. And some of the things that you can do to make your firm a great place to work don't cost money. So I'd encourage you to look at that and really think about what the definition of a great place to work looks like for your firm. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And then think about it in a roadmap kind of way. Think about what you would have to do in 2021 and what you would have to do in 2022. What do you have to get permission to implement? What has to go before the board or a managing partner? And think about what that roadmap looks like. Flexible work policies. We have given people flexibility, generally speaking, like we never have before in this work from home environment. And I think everyone's going to have to decide what that looks like for them going forward. And maybe it's a hybrid workplace. Maybe it is, 3 days a week, or maybe it's every other week. There's lots of different options for flexible work policies. But I think that one thing I've seen that I have found really interesting, that was a very, very specific policy that one of our clients put into place, and they have it in their handbook, and it says something like, please don't ever let work get in the way of, and it listed out like a soccer game, a baseball game, a dance recital. It listed out all of these things that are typical activities that someone with kids would have. But then there was a follow-up paragraph there about people who didn't have kids and things that might be important to them. And the general message was, look, we spend a lot of our time at work. An honest week's work can be exchanged for some flexibility in what that looks like. Think about where you might be able to offer that flexibility on an ongoing basis for the rest of 2021. It is a great tool when it comes to making your firm a great place to work and attracting and retaining talent. A path for advancement. We have worked with a lot of our clients on what it takes to be an associate attorney. And what the next steps are for someone who is an associate attorney. And sometimes it's learning a different practice area. Sometimes it's becoming a non-equity partner. Sometimes it's a path to equity partner. Sometimes it's a path to being a rainmaker or assisting, helping, teaching a younger lawyer about business development and getting new clients and what that looks like. But everyone really wants to understand what a path for advancement looks like. From a lawyer perspective, those are some examples. From a paralegal perspective, it might be sitting down and talking with someone about other things that they want to learn. Maybe it's other practice areas that they want to learn. Maybe it's other things that they could do, not independently, like practicing law independently, but other work that they can get done at their desk to help an attorney or make an attorney's life easier. Maybe it's a new software program, learning a new software program. But people want to understand what a path for advancement looks like, and anywhere you can give that to them. Again, back to attracting and retaining top talent, great place to work, being flexible with people. And then finally, learning and growth opportunities. I joke all the time and say, I stand behind people and I watch them manage their email or get their work done in Microsoft Word. And I think, can I just show you a faster, better, easier way to do that? Even tools like Microsoft Word and Outlook that we spend a lot of our time in, there's so much opportunity for learning and growth. But there's also that opportunity with the tools that you use to run your practice. Maybe you have practice management software, the way that you get your billing done, or maybe your PDF tool. Maybe it's leadership and management, it's people development skills. Maybe it's communication skills. There's so many opportunities that we can present to our employees from a learning and growth perspective that again feeds into that great place to work, attracting and retaining top talent. The bottom line message here about this first key is, if we don't pay attention to our employees, someone else will. It's not good enough to just let them come to work every day in exchange for a paycheck. Think about how you can make their experience working with you as meaningful as possible, and how you can meet people's needs in a way that maybe we didn't even think about before, we didn't have an opportunity to do before. The second key is optimizing business processes. It's really time for all of us to say inefficient processes aren't okay, whatever that is. And I think that one of the best ways for us to start socializing that message in our firms, inefficient processes are not okay, is to start talking about how we might reward innovation. And rewarding innovation doesn't have to be all about money. It could be about recognition. It could be an employee of the month thing. It could be just a gift card, a Target gift card or a Starbucks gift card. But challenge people to think differently about how they get their work done. One of the tools that a handful of our clients use, and we oftentimes recommend this to people, is thinking about having like an Innovation Friday. So one Friday a month, you bring everybody in on a Zoom call, or when we're back in person, maybe bring everybody into a conference room, or everyone who wants to participate. And everybody goes around and shares one idea of how some process at the firm could be done more efficiently. You can talk it through, you can ask people to challenge what someone has proposed, you can try to poke holes in it, but the goal is to come out of that Innovation Friday with an idea or two that you can implement pretty easily to improve how work gets done at the firm. And then maybe there's some kind of a reward based on, voting who had the best idea and which one did you dissect and figure out a way to make it work. But people should be rewarded for innovation. Oftentimes what we hear is, I'll ask someone about an inefficient process that is pretty clear and obvious to me, and they'll say, yeah, it really is inefficient, but I've suggested many times that we make a change to it, and I just get pushback with either that will never work, or that's the way we've always done it, or that's the way Bob down the hall wants us to do it. It's just not worth the energy trying to change it. And I think there's a really big opportunity for us to think about that. I'd also encourage you to document how your work gets done. I think about this like a firm cookbook. one recipe at a time. Start with how do we answer the phones? How do we greet the clients when they come in? And go all the way through how do we close a file? If you think about writing a cookbook, it seems like a long, laborious, challenging task. But if you think about just jotting down a recipe, it's not that hard. So if you start with, how do we answer phones and how do calls get routed? And you start with that process and you just document it. You run it by a couple of people, make sure that it looks good. You save it as a Word document, and that is recipe number one. And you just keep on going through the things that you regularly do and documenting them. That really does help with turnover. It helps with training. It helps with cross training. It also helps us once we are forced to write down how we do things, we often take a minute to stop and think and say, that doesn't really make sense. We do it regularly and it makes sense because it's what we've always done. But when you put it down on a piece of paper, you think, is that really the best way to get that done? The other thing that I would recommend that you do is think of ways to minimize silos. I just recently was on a call with a client, three partners, and it was me and these three partners on a call, the only three partners in the firm. And we started talking about intake. And I said, tell me a little bit about how that works. And the first one started, and he ended with, that's how I do it. And then the second one started, and she ended with, that's how I do it. And then the third one started, and he ended with, and that's how I do it. And there were little tweaks in each one of them that were just a little bit different. And they have one billing clerk. And long story short, the billing clerk is the process that she has to go through is painful because not everybody opens up files the same way. She's like, well, if I'm doing a bill for this person, I have to do it this way. That's maybe an extreme example, but I hear this whole, we're a very entrepreneurial firm and we let people kind of do things the way that they want to do, the way they want to practice. And while I can certainly understand that to some degree when it comes to how you actually deal with your clients, your administrative processes should be as streamlined as they can be. And that brings me to my last point about this, which is say goodbye to the bottlenecks and redundancies. If you have a micromanager at your firm who insists that everything goes through that one person, talk to that person about letting go. If you are writing things down in a paper calendar, yes, that just happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to a client who was keeping track of their calendar on the computer, and they wrote it down. And I said, why are you writing it down? And they said, because the rule is that we have to have redundant calendars. And so I explained what redundancy actually means and how they could have a redundant calendar even with their calendar system. Redundancies that make no sense, that just cost extra time, really should be eliminated. So I'd look around and think about what are the bottlenecks? And you might not be the person at your firm that always knows what the bottlenecks are, but think about who you can ask. What makes your job challenging here? What makes it harder than it needs to be? Tell us what those things are. If you had to call out one thing in this firm that's a bottleneck, what would it be? What are we doing unnecessarily? Ask the questions. All of these things together can add up to optimized business processes. And unfortunately, there is no end in sight, right? Just as soon as we get through optimizing all of our processes, it's time to start at the beginning again. The technology changes, the clients change, the people change. There's all kinds of changes that allow us to continually be in this cycle of improvement. And every firm that kind of embraces that continuous improvement methodology will have this ongoing desire to think about ways to get work done more efficiently. And then the last one is maximizing your technology ROI. So many firms have technology that they have invested in that they aren't using or they are barely using. And maybe one of the most efficient and highest return on investment technology challenges that I think firms really benefited from if they tackled this before the pandemic is really thinking about what their cloud strategy is. We have a lot of firms who use a hosted infrastructure provider so they can really work from anywhere. And the way that those firms went home to work was very, very different than the way that firms who still have a server in their office went home and got their work done. And so now's the time. If you haven't done it already, really think about what your cloud strategy is going to be and how to eliminate the dependence that many firms, most firms still have of in-house servers. There are ways to do that incredibly efficiently and incredibly secure. In fact, way more secure than keeping your servers on site. So it's time to really investigate and execute on a cloud strategy if you haven't already. And then replace or upgrade old software. We are in the middle of a campaign right now called the Antique Roadshow Replacement Campaign. The Antique Roadshow is those programs that you bought 20 years ago that may have, done a great job for you so far, but it's time for you to really think about what your firm needs going forward in 2021. And it's time to think about replacing or upgrading that old software. Embracing a culture of tech education that meets the needs of everyone is also really important. Not everyone learns the same way. Not everyone can learn from a 1-hour webinar that I teach. Some people need a manual. Some people need a 10-minute video. Some people need hands-on training. Think about each one of your users and have conversations with everyone about the way that they learn and how you can best accommodate them when it comes to technology education. I say all the time, especially let's just use the example of Word and Outlook training. I'll say to an administrator or to a lawyer in a firm, you really should provide some training. And I regularly get, we did Outlook training. And my response is always the same. People need to be reminded more than they need to be taught. If I teach someone, if I do a session for you called 10 Outlook tips and tricks that will change the way you use Microsoft Outlook, I can guarantee you that you will walk away with 1 or 2 things that you'll do differently. But there probably will be 2 or 3 other things that you didn't know about that you won't be able to implement because it's too much change at one time. Ongoing training is the best way to get your people to use the tools that they have and to leverage the technology you've invested in. And the last point on that, technology done right is evolutionary. It's not revolutionary. You don't buy it and then it completely changes your whole life. You buy something, you learn how to use it. You learn a little bit more how to use it. It's kind of like the crawl, walk, run thing, but it should be evolutionary. And if there's any piece of technology that you're looking at that is a necessary part of running your business and you think this technology makes my job harder, something's wrong. You maybe need more training. Maybe it needs to be set up differently. Maybe it's the wrong software program altogether. But you should be looking at, I hate the word technology stack, but you should be looking at all of the technology you use, sometimes also referred to as the technology stack, and thinking about how you can make the best use of everything. And if there's anything that you're like, this makes my job hard, you should start asking some questions about that. So those are my 3 keys to maximizing profitability: an employee-centered approach, optimize your business processes, and maximize your technology ROI. The last thing I want to say is how, oh, sorry,
Debbie,
yes.
We do have one question. I thought
Sure.
This was a good spot for that.
Yes.
Robert says, path for advancement for all attorneys and staff is being proactive and not having to be micromanaged, needing to be told how or what to do. Often this is a personality trait that either exists or does not exist. So how can this proactive approach be taught as a mindset?
It starts with how we talk about things and what kinds of repetitive information is shared with people. I would encourage you, Karen, I just was looking for, let me just pull up that path for advancement. Okay, I didn't hear the first part of about what you said. I think that some of this comes with expectations and making sure that people know exactly what is expected of them and then letting them fail. And that's oftentimes a hard thing to do. And if you let them fail, hopefully you can do that in the least risky ways. But if you let them fail and you do the right kind of coaching and training afterwards, what you should see is an improvement. If you let them fail and you coach and train and they don't get any better, it ends up being a challenge with just having the wrong people. And that's a tough problem, and something that we deal with a lot of our clients. You know, the if you think about your team members as A, B, and C players, sometimes I ask people, if that person put in their resignation, would you chase them out the door and say, please don't leave? Or would you say, oh, thank goodness? Sometimes what we're trying to do is we're trying to turn our C players into A players. And that is not an easy thing to do. I won't say it never happens, but it's pretty rare that it happens. So I think the first thing is making sure you have the right people. The second thing is very clearly managing expectations. And then the third thing is giving constructive feedback regularly to make sure that what is expected is reinforced. Was that the only question, Karen?
It was. Thank you so much.
Okay. So finally, how can we help? If there's anything that we can do to help you with any of those items, I joke all the time and say Affinity does a million things. If there's anything that we can do to help, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to throw my email address up here on the screen. You are welcome to send me an email directly if you have any questions about today's webinar or ways that Affinity can help you. And of course, Karen will be sending you a follow-up email with the recording and her contact information, and you can always reach out to Karen directly and she can help get you connected with the right person at Affinity. And thank you very much for your time, everyone.